Hi, it's Saturday, September 27th, Sunday the 28th in the West Pacific, and we've got four systems to discuss in the tropics today. We've got Hurricane Humberto sitting in central Atlantic. This is a powerful hurricane today, passing well north of the Caribbean islands, and this is forecast to remain a powerful hurricane for the next several days as it tracks northwest, though it could bring some impacts to Bermuda as we head towards the middle of this upcoming week. We've also got now Tropical Depression 9 sitting in the southern Bahamas. I'm going to be calling this Imelda just to avoid any confusion because a lot of designations are changing with this system right now, and it will likely get this name later today or early on tomorrow. And in the Western Pacific, we've actually got two systems to discuss here. We've got Typhoon Bualoi in the South China Sea. The system is nearing landfall in Vietnam and may intensify significantly today on approach to landfall. And we also got Neoguri still sitting up here in the far North Pacific. And we haven't discussed this for a few days. It's really just been sitting out here fairly weak in the far North Pacific. But now the system is tracking towards the northeast and going away now. And we'll start off with this because it's a fairly short segment. The system, like I said, has just really been sitting out here, and there was some concern at some points of this track where it could potentially come south enough to where it gets caught under a ridge and tracks towards the west, maybe closer to some land areas further west. But that fortunately has not happened, and now the system is being ushered towards the northeast. There's a trough, which is hard to see on this map, but you can kind of get the sense of all the southwesterly flow just west of the typhoon. That's outlining the edge of this trough, which is now ushering the storm towards the northeast. It's better seen here if we look at the GFS upper level flow. You can see here's this trough axis, and again, this is ushering it towards the northeast. Now, the system is still not done intensifying yet. It's almost at 35 north latitude, and we can see the system is trying to clear out its eye. A fairly incredible feat to see, but now the system is approaching cooler waters, and as it continues to interact with its trough, shear is going to continuously increase out of the southwest, and so that will cause the system to weaken and turn post-tropical as it tracks towards the northeast. And once it turns post-tropical, we could see some impacts in southwestern Alaska, but we're not going to talk too much about that, as I typically just focus on tropical systems. Now moving to the South China Sea, we have Typhoon Bualoi sitting here just southeast of Hainan. This system is doing much better today as the wind shear that we discussed yesterday morning has decreased significantly. If we look at the water vapor imagery, you can see if we highlight this part of the South China Sea just west of Luzon, we no longer have that northeasterly shear coming into the scene. We now have all this westerly flow highlighting outflow that's radiating out from the typhoon and showing you that marketable decrease in that easterly shear. Now, we do still have some shear in the vicinity of the storm. There's an upper low here and an upper ridge off towards its west. And between these, we have a strong fetch of northerly flow coming down into Vietnam. And this is just west of the typhoon, and it might cause some disruption today, but models generally expect this to not impact it all too much. And we're still expecting, unfortunately, a more quick phase of intensification before landfall sometime tonight or early on Monday. Now, so far, the system has not been intensifying very quickly. We are still seeing the system likely in the phase of recuperating itself from the northeasterly shear yesterday. We can see convection is trying to wrap around all the way on the center and likely trying to build and close off an inner core structure. And once that happens, the system will likely be able to intensify quicker, and that's what models are generally showing here. And that's the current forecast from the Joint Typhoon Warning Center, showing it becoming a strong typhoon by later this evening and making landfall there again late tonight or early on Monday. And as it pushes inland just northwest of where the eye makes landfall, that's going to be where the worst storm surge is. But we could also be dealing with very strong typhoon force winds as it comes ashore along the immediate coast. But beyond that, as it weakens further inland, the main risk will be rainfall as it passes through all this high terrain here in southern Asia, and that could lead to flooding issues well inland from where it makes landfall. So stay safe in Vietnam as Bualoi comes in. This will likely be my last video on Bualoi as a whole. And now we're going to move to the Atlantic as we have two systems to discuss here. We've got Hurricane Humberto in the central Atlantic, which is a powerful major hurricane today. And we're going to start with this one. We'll talk about Imelda in just a moment. And Humberto is a extremely impressive hurricane today. This is a close-up mesoscale look at the hurricane today from Ghost 19. And what you're looking at is 1 minute imagery. And this is so an image is taken of the storm every 1 minute. And so you get this very smooth look and very updated look at the hurricane. And just looking at the structure of this looks like a high-end hurricane with the eye very clear. You can see the ocean surface down here very clear at the bottom of the eye, and the thunderstorms surrounding this eye are also very symmetric around this, a classic telltale sign that you have an extreme hurricane by this point in the hurricane's life cycle. And the good news of this is it's doing this in the middle of the ocean. It's not impacting any land areas and will not for the next few days. The most that we could expect in islands like Bermuda and the Caribbean islands for the short term is high surf as the system passes to the north, as it will be churning up the ocean water here, and those high waves will radiate outwards from the hurricane. But as we go into this week, it will begin to recurve as it approaches all the southwesterly flow across the western Atlantic, and that will cause it to recurve likely just west of the island. Though unfortunately, all the southwesterly shear, or this flow is a southwesterly shear, and so that's going to mean the eastern side is going to be, so to speak, the ugly side of the hurricane, as all the strong thunderstorms and winds are probably going to be pushed off to the eastern side because of all this shear. So for Bermuda, we may be looking at some impacts from the system going forward. You can see the environment as the system goes throughout the next few days. For the short term, the environment remains rather ideal for the system to intensify or really remain as a powerful major hurricane. May not see too much more intensification by this point, but it may remain around the Category 4, Category 5 threshold for the next several days, as the system really only has IWR replacement cycles that could weaken it. The only other thing that could weaken it is some outflow from Imelda further towards the west. You can see that in this upper lower wind plot, as the thunderstorms blow up over Imelda, we get some outflow coming out to the east, and you see this northerly shear is getting very close to the western edge of Humberto. But models have been pretty consistent in showing this not getting quite to Humberto to cause any significant issues. And this makes sense because Imelda has been trending further towards the west, so the outflow would tend to be further west as well, meaning that the system would likely not get impacted by that shear all too much. Now, beyond this, you can see all the southwesterly shear increase as the system tracks further towards the north. And this is a depiction from the HAFS model, a high-resolution hurricane model, as the system is passing just northwest of Bermuda. And a lot of models are taking this northwest of the island, so the eye of the hurricane does remain away, but you can see through the storm gaining size through IWR replacement cycles and gaining latitude, we may see this system still rake the island with some tropical storm force winds, sort of similar to what we had with Hurricane Erin last month, but it's probably not going to be that big of a hurricane when it's between the US and Bermuda. But we could still see some tropical storm force winds, and we'll watch it if the eye does come a little bit closer, as some of the stronger winds, maybe of hurricane force, could get closer to the island. But for now, we're looking at, just a risk of some tropical storm force winds. And this is the current forecast from the Hurricane Center. You can see the general idea, remaining a powerful major hurricane for the next several days out to next Tuesday. That's when wind shear begins to increase, and the system is also going to be reaching cooler sea surface temperatures. So the system will begin to weaken, and you can see passing northwest of the island. But you can see you're on the edge of the cone, so it's still possible we do see some deviation. And if it does pass closer, that would certainly increase the risk of strong winds. Though some good news as well with this is it will be accelerating by this point in the forecast. You can see by Thursday morning, it's now well south of Newfoundland in Canada. So it's now far, far away from Bermuda. So the impacts will not be very prolonged in the island if we do get any. Okay, finally, we're going to talk about for the rest of the video Imelda in the southern Bahamas. Again, I'm calling this Imelda. It's still a tropical depression, but I'm calling it Imelda to avoid any confusion because the system is about to get the name later today or early tomorrow. And we've had a lot of designation changes over the past few days, from an invest to a potential tropical cyclone to a tropical depression. And I would rather not cause too much confusion with all changing numbers and names on the system. But what we have seen today compared to yesterday is the system has now gotten more coherent at the surface into a more well-formed surface flow. And this has really been the primary thing that we've been wondering about over the past few days. As like I've described over the past couple of days, models up to this point have really been playing a guessing game. Where is the center going to form? Is it going to form up here? Is it going to form down here? Is it going to wait and form further up here? And all of those different scenarios had different futures for Imelda. But now we can confidently say that the system is forming here, and this is now our launching point. So we're no longer playing a guessing game, and we now know generally the future of Imelda as it tracks up towards the southeast US coast. This is a recon flight that's in there right now. I'll reload this so we get the latest information from it. And you can see that while it is a very weak and fairly broad circulation, it is much more organized than it was yesterday. And this is likely the formation of a low-level center, which will likely be the core, so to speak, of the storm going forward. Now, the trend of this is that now, the GFS, for example, kept forming this low further towards the northeast. And as we've talked about for the past couple of days, where the system formed relative to the Bermuda High was going to be crucial, because if it was further northeast, like the GFS showed, this ridge is pulling it towards the northwest regardless. But if it's closer to it, the flow around the ridge is stronger than it is if it's further towards the southwest. It's not by that much of a difference. It's not a large margin of speed difference here. But the difference is that now that we're forming further southwest, we're slow enough to where Humberto is going to have enough time to come in and likely stop the system from making landfall, or at least stall it right along the coastline. And that's the current expectation for most models now today. You can see the GFS is very similar to what it showed yesterday afternoon, showing the storm getting very close to the coast and then just kind of stalling offshore and gradually turning east as all the southwesterly flow across this part of the Atlantic begins to carry it out to sea. And this is also shared by the European model. This was also a model that was showing landfall happen yesterday. And you can see now it's very similar to the GFS. It stalls offshore and then tracks towards the east slowly away as Humberto, with its interaction with the storm, begins to push it back towards the south and keeps it from making landfall here. And so we now have much more certainty in this kind of a forecast of the system not making landfall here. Now, is it possible that we do still see a landfall out of Imelda? Yes, but I'd say the probability of that has decreased some. But importantly, like I've discussed over the past 2 days, just because the system is not making landfall does not mean we're not going to have any impacts from the system. If we look at the upper level winds as the system stalls offshore, we have this trough axis here over the deep south, and on the eastern side of this, we've got a lot of southerly flow being impinged upon the vortex of the storm. This may be a hurricane by this point. And so that means all of the heaviest rain and all of the deep tropical moisture is going to be pushed to the north into the southeastern United States. You can see this on the moisture plot from the GFS, which again has this remaining offshore, but all this deep green here showing that deep tropical moisture gets pushed right into the Carolinas and into Virginia. Now, exactly how close the system gets to the coast will determine the highest rainfall totals that we have, especially along the coast of the Carolinas. But what we can expect across the Carolinas in general is several inches of rain from this event, regardless of how close the system is and regardless of a landfall that we may see. And this is the current forecast for the rainfall from the Weather Prediction Center, and you can see totals overall have come down a bit because we are trending a little bit more offshore with models today, but still, this is significant rainfall that may fall in just a few day period, and so this could lead to some flooding issues, especially along coastal South Carolina and North Carolina. And note that it's not just kept to the Carolinas, this also goes from the coast of Florida into Georgia as the system tracks up the southeast coast. And alongside that, we could see the system rake that coast with tropical storm force winds. Now, of course, the U.S. is not going to be the only area getting rainfall from this. This is the rainfall forecast for the Bahamas, Cuba, and then Hispaniola, Haiti, and the Dominican Republic. You can see we could have some further heavy rainfall in the high terrain in Cuba, potentially up to 300 millimeters or more. And across the central and northern Bahamas, we could have a wide swath of 100 to 200 millimeters of rainfall across all of these islands. And finally, this is the Hurricane Center forecast. You can see the shift in the forecast cone from yesterday. Now the center track is offshore, but you can see the general range of where the system could track. It's possible that we do get the system rather close to the coast, and it may be a hurricane by this point, so that could increase the risk of wind and storm surge along the coast. So this does still bear watching, and we'll likely see later today or early tomorrow tropical storm watches be issued further up the coast. For now, we've got tropical storm warnings for most of the Bahamas, and now a tropical storm watch for eastern Florida from, say, about Fort Lauderdale up to Orlando or Daytona Beach. I'm just guessing here, but that looks like generally where the tropical storm watch goes. And this may be extended further north up towards Jacksonville. The next advisory comes out about an hour after this video is being recorded, so they may have more tropical storm watches issued for Florida, even into Georgia by the time this video is out. And I will leave a link to the Hurricane Center website so you can see the latest advisories as they come out. And I will, of course, have more videos on this system as it tracks towards the northwest. And one more graphic I'll show you. This is the probability of tropical storm force winds and the earliest reasonable arrival time of those tropical storm force winds. Along eastern Florida, you can see you have about until tomorrow evening when they could arrive at their earliest. So you have the rest of the day today and most of Sunday to prepare really along this east coast of Florida, and most of the rest of the weekend for northeast Florida, Georgia, and the Carolinas. And you can see those probabilities of tropical storm force winds are also increasing along this entire coast, now getting to around 30%, which is a significant probability for those areas there. That's all that I've got for today on all four of our systems. We'll likely be focusing on the Atlantic for the next few days as the West Pacific quiets down for a little bit now after Bualoi and Neoguri. But stay safe in the Bahamas as Imelda comes through today, and stay safe in Vietnam as Typhoon Bualoi tracks through later tonight and into Monday. That's all for now. Thanks for watching.